Okay, this is the first lesson on a lecture series on how the United States is cooking up a new Cold War with Russia. All right. Today's lesson is just an introduction in which we'll cover a brief historical context for the new Cold War to put this in a historical perspective. And I'll provide an introductory outline of what I'm going to present. All right. So this diagram shows the context. Here's the new Cold War. All right, it's very rudimentary, and a key point here was World War II. Now, from the start of the United States, and you could say the United States started when we declared independence in 1775 through our war upon England. That was our real declaration of independence. From that time on, the United States did not maintain large standing armies up through World War II. However, 2 years after World War II ended, the first Cold War started. And from that time on until present, the U.S. has maintained a permanently large military establishment and intelligence establishment. All right. And this first Cold War lasted between 1947 and 1991. All right. 10 years after this war ended with the fall of the Soviet Union, the War of Terror started with the bin Laden attacks on 9/11 of 2001. All right. Since then, this war on terror has largely fizzled. It's fading out. Now it's been replaced by a new Cold War with Russia primarily and with China. All right. So to reiterate, prior to World War II, the United States did not maintain large standing armies during peacetime, largely because the USA is protected by two big oceans, Atlantic on the east and Pacific on the west, and the U.S. has no real threats from the north or south. Right? Canada and Mexico is not really threatening us. All right. Now, World War II pulled the USA out of the Great Depression, but by the end of World War II, with the massive cancellation of war contracts, the economy was contracting. But within 2 years, we entered a Cold War, 1947. The original Cold War was characterized by one, a continuous elevated sense of threat. Now, young people out there may, not appreciate this, but I grew up during the Cold War, right? I mean, you're not always thinking that sense of threat, but in the back of your mind, you always knew of it. There was a very um, poignant competition between the Soviet Union and the United States, and there was a popular perception of a menacing and aggressive communist expansion, right? Including inside the United States with, communist subversion, all that McCarthyist, Red Scare fear that was being pumped up. And there was a popular perception of an ever pervading nuclear threat hanging over our heads, right? I felt this firsthand as a kid in grade school, having to practice duck and cover in case of a nuclear attack, where you hide under your desk. Uh, the popular perception of an awesome and hegemonic conventional Soviet military threat. That they had this massive conventional army where their tanks can just roll across Europe whenever they wanted. This elevated sense of threat, real or manufactured, drove an arms race, both nuclear and conventional arms race. Now, arms races are characterized by a drive, or arms races drive increased production of weapons to attain numerical superiority. But even more importantly, they accelerate research and development to produce new weapon systems to replace the older, now outdated systems at an accelerated rate. They do this, which is essentially a form of consumption, which always drives demand. But now, new weapon systems replacement can be even better than simple consumption, in that the old weapon systems can be one, they can be sold, which the United States has done a lot of, or two, given to dictators to support their tottering regimes, which the United States has also done a lot of. Now, I fully expect that, the average, flag waving, chest beating American who doesn't know any of the historical facts will say, bullshit, the U.S. doesn't support dictators. That is so far from the facts, the truth. The U.S. has supported numerous dictators around the world. We've taken down democracies and installed dictators. All right, it's classic neo-colonial control. It's about who you can control. You can't control democracy. You can control a dictator, right? Uh, Now, economically, Cold War arms race, like any war, is fundamentally a government enterprise, and as such serves as a Keynesian economic stimulus, right? A demand side stimulus, a fiscal policy stimulus. All right, pump priming. All right, suddenly and then seemingly overnight, the Soviet Union fell apart and the original Cold War ended. That was in 1991, right? Now, no one was more surprised and shocked than the CIA and the defense establishment, right? I remember back then, it was like, what just happened, right? And the American people were taken by surprise just as much because for decades they were fed the notion of an immense, hegemonic, overwhelming Soviet military threat, right? This massive, powerful nation and military, right? Now, but for years, I've been saying that the Soviet Union is rife with centrifugal forces that threaten to blow it apart from within and which make it ripe for a fall. I was also saying that the Soviet Union conventional military threat was both weak and that any major offensive operation conducted by the Soviet Union, especially directed against Western NATO alliance, would only accelerate the Soviet Union's fall by igniting internal instability and probably setting off a revolution like has been done, multiple times in the past in Russia and in the Soviet Union. Now, I guess a comment here is the average person does not at all understand that the power of large-scale conventional warfighting ability is best understood in a holistic sociological analysis. I performed such an analysis on the Soviet conventional military capability and found it exceedingly weak. All right, I'm not going to go into the details of that. All right, now, I was pretty much the only person saying these things back in the 1980s, and it was I who was proven right. But I stood alone against the masses, right? They all saw the Soviet Union as this immense threat, right? Right? I'm saying it's about ready to crumble. What are you talking about? Now, why do they believe that? One, groupthink. Two, the overwhelming power of social, quote, reality when it has no basis in fact or intelligent analysis. Social reality is typically simple, two-sentence blurb, right? Written at a fourth grade level. And it dominates mass perceptions because it gets mass spread. It has mass propagation. All right? Everyone's saying it, so everyone believes it's real. Right? Based upon that, no real factual basis or intelligent analysis. The king with no clothes principle, which is really the same thing. It's a social phenomenon that applies to the masses, right? That's really social reality. The near total lack of ability for intelligent, independent analysis. I swear, people will all say that, oh, I'm intelligent, I can figure things out. They cannot. Either they know no facts, they lack the ability to analyze, or they just don't put forth the effort. Now, people in the CIA and defense establishment were parroting the company line for career enhancement, but really people do this all the time. For example, in social groups, right? They parrot the popular line to fit in with the crowd, or they simply parrot it because they know nothing else, right? A lot of times they are afraid of being the oddball, so they become sheep. Now, About the same time the Soviet Union fell, the first Gulf War was fought and won with a brilliant victory. I wrote the strategy for that war. Although people will attack, oh, no, you didn't. But the aftermath, especially in regards to WMD inspections and economic sanctions on Iraq, was screwed up. And these things drove bin Laden's six primary motives for attacking the USA on 9/11. Right? In Scott Ritter's book, I taught you this. Yeah, I doubt anyone remembers, but I taught you how Scott Ritter went in detail many things, many ways in which the CIA and U.S. government undermined and sabotaged the UN weapons inspections, right? Because their motive was not to find WMD, but to maintain the popular perception within the public and especially within Congress that Saddam Hussein was lying and hiding WMD and concealing, right? I can't teach you all the details of this book again, right? What he said. And remember, Scott Ritter was the lead inspector on the ground who was running these inspections, designing these inspections, and his operations were being sabotaged and undermined by the CIA and U.S. government. All right. Now, at the same time, based upon the weapons inspections, you had economic sanctions, which were basically starving Iraq. All right. And, a lot of kids died. Over 500,000, 565,000 Iraqi kids died. Bin Laden rounded it up to 600,000. Right? That was one of his main motives for attacking us on 9/11. And the other main motive, I cite six here, but they all originate from the first Gulf War. Right? Another main motive was U.S. Intervenes in the Middle East, plays dirty games in the Middle East to control oil. Right? Very simplistic, but that's Bin Laden. And it's in part true, but it's only part of the bigger economic picture of what we do in the Middle East, which I taught you. And I can't teach it all again. With the 9/11 attacks, the U.S. embarked upon the war on terror, which included Bush administration's manipulation of Congress and the American public into the Iraq invasion war. Again, I bet you I'm going to get attacked on this, but I taught you exactly how the Bush administration planned and designed using the 1 year anniversary of the 9/11 attacks to conduct a bait and switch, which they flipped all the horror and terror and fear of the 9/11 attacks and compounded it with WMD and flipped that onto Iraq, who had nothing to do with the 9/11 attacks and who had no ties with Al Qaeda and who were hunting down the religious fanatics and radicals in the country because they posed a threat to Iraq, wanting to overthrow the government to set up their caliphate. Now, currently, the war on terror is losing steam. It's fizzling out. But it's being replaced by a new Cold War in which the United States' principal adversaries are Russia and China, and to a lesser extent, Iran and North Korea. Now, in my analysis of this new Cold War, I will focus on Russian and Chinese threats separately. With Russia, the U.S. is the instigator, and the Russian military threat is both grossly over-exaggerated and largely manufactured. I will show you how. Again, I know this is going to be attacked, right? I haven't taught you anything yet, but people are going to say, bullshit, unbelievable. And they're going to know no facts, all right? All they're going to have is one-word reality. Unbelievable, unreal, conspiracy theory. And it's going to be supported by social reality, so it's going to appear real in their brains. Social reality is ultimate reality in their brains. Not facts, not intelligent analysis, which they know none of. With China, China is the instigator, but again, the military threat is being grossly exaggerated, especially in the South China Sea. I mean, that doesn't mean China won't try to elbow and shove at the edges to get whatever it can get away with on the cheap, right? try to see what they're gonna what's gonna be given to them. However, all that is required is unity between the United States and regional nations, plus their combined military forces, especially naval forces, um, and for them to take a firm stand and not give an inch, because China's military forces are far outclassed by the USA's alone, but especially against combined forces of all these other nations with the US. Right? I mean, it's just ridiculous, you know, overwhelming, you know, you know, overpowering of China's forces. But more importantly, the benefits cost ratio for China is a joke. All right. I'll explain all this in detail when I get to it. Now, this is going to be a talk because, again, I'm just introducing it. I'm not stating any facts, right? All of this is going to be attacked because this is just an outline. So, there's a specific outline for the Cold War with Russia. First thing I'm going to do is show how economics has always been the driving motive behind warfare, specifically resource and wealth production. That's always been the basis of war. No doubt many will argue that no, the driving motive for war has been quest for power, or empire, or ideology. However, each of these are rooted in and underlined by economics. Economics is the foundation for all that. Economics is the basis of power. Economics is the basis of empire. And uh, ideology is based upon beliefs of the best political economic system, right? For example, the whole question between capitalism versus communism during the Cold War, which was primarily focused upon which system was a better means of production. I mean, that's the way it started with Marx analysis, right? Just analyzing the historical development of the, means of production. Um, Now, even the so-called religious wars, like the Crusades, right, were really struggles between different groups who were only identified along religious lines, but what they're really doing is fighting over control of critical trade routes and resources in order to control wealth generation, which was the means to power and security. All right, that was the key to that war. Going in and trying to aggressively uh, attack the heart of Muslim strength, which was in their trade routes. All right, it was the Silk Road and the spice trade. I'll also show how warfighting ability and economics go hand in hand and are mutually dependent. I've shown you this before, the evolution of how profit is made from war. Um, and then I'll show how the effective control of collective resources has not only been the means of building great empire, but also the means of acquiring great personal fortune and thus power. I call this controlling the flow of collective resources hydrological engineering. Right? It's a term that comes from ancient Egypt, but I'm not going to get into that. Next, I'll show that no one should be surprised that the United States is cooking up a new Cold War, given the fact that the United States is, in reality, a warmonger nation. Right? Now, most Americans aren't going to believe this. Most Americans are going to be um, angered by this. They're going to vociferously scream and cry, that's not true, that's bullshit. Right? But the facts state the exact opposite. And it's easy to prove, it's easy to show. All right? The American masses only believe this far-fetched fairy tale that the USA is peace-loving because, one, they know zero of the historical facts on the frequency and numbers of wars. All right? If you my original analysis, I just did this last year, and if you take the start of the United States from our real Declaration of Independence, starting the Revolutionary War in 1775 to 2019, that's 244 years, right? In that time, the United States has fought 675 war years, right? That's 2.77 wars every year. Right? We're fighting war after war. And there's only been 16 years where we have not fought a war out of that 244 years. We're always fighting wars, and we're always fighting multiple wars. All right? And these wars are not defensive, that we're being attacked by this nation or that. I mean, there's been a few, you know, fighting against the Barbary pirates. Oh, yeah, we got to fight these guys. We can't let anyone take our commerce because that's our economy, right? But even, people are going to point to, well, we're attacked on, 9/11, or we're attacked at Pearl Harbor. Well, I've taught you about Pearl Harbor. It's not as simple as just Japan out of the blue attacking us, right? I showed you. In fact, I showed you that one-page summary where at the center, I said, it's going to sound far-fetched, but the Roosevelt administration not only maneuvered Japan into attacking the United States, right, making it, a necessity that they attack us, cornering them so they have to attack us, but we opened the door. I taught you exactly how that was done. Now, I know people aren't going to remember, so they're going to say, oh, unbelievable, bullshit. Why? Because they remember zero historical facts, right? And even 9/11, right? I taught you in detail the history of U.S. involvement in the Middle East and how that's been, fraught with a lot of dirty things, starting a lot of conflict, right? And how Bin Laden's motives lead directly back to the first Gulf War. Now, can I teach you all this again? No, right? So if you don't know it, right, you're just going to believe what you want to believe or believe social reality, which is a baseless joke repeated and reinforced by the masses, which makes it seem real. But what's it based upon? A couple simple, stupid sentences written at the fourth grade level, right? No factual basis, but it dominates. Social reality dominates mass perception all the time. Why? That's all they have. They don't bother to study the facts, and they don't retain the facts. I'll then provide a framework for my analysis of the new Cold War. Next, I'll prove the fallacy of the belief in Russian expansionism. I'll show you, right, that Russia's not expanding. Russia's being pushed to the wall, all around it. All right? In the West, in Europe, in the South, in the Middle East. Russia is only expanding ties with China, right? And most recently with India. It's going to sell gas with India, right? But as far as its client state all around, it's being pushed back. It's lost all its client states in the Middle East except for Syria, which is just a fragment left. It's all broken up. And it really has, what does it have left in Europe? Nothing really. I mean, Ukraine's gone pro-West. Even Belarus is shifting to the West, right? Belarus is buying U.S. oil when it was traditionally just connected to the hip with Russia. That's changed, right? Russia has nothing left. For a while, it was only they have Armenia. That's about it. I'll prove the fallacy of Russian hegemonic stranglehold over European energy security. All right? I'll do an economic analysis. I'll do an analysis of gas. And I swear, this will be attacked by who? By people who know nothing. Right? It'll be swept away with one or two sentences in social reality. And that'll dominate. That's all they'll have in their head. Two simple, stupid, baseless sentences. In this analysis, I will prove how the U.S. is using Russia's dependence on natural gas to provoke a conflict. The U.S. is trying to say Russia has this axe hanging over Europe's head, right? And that's a total joke and lie. All you have to do is be able to do a simple market analysis of monopoly power within a market. All right? If you can do that, you can see that it's easy to show that this is a joke. I'll then focus, but how many people can do that? I'll then focus on how the United States is driving a nuclear arms race with its unilateral abrogation of the ABM Treaty for ridiculous, bogus reasons. This whole idea of Iran threat to Poland, Romania, Eastern Europe, right? I'll show you how ridiculous this whole thing is. But it's really jams Russia with a direct threat by disrupting the nuclear balance, right? Anyone with half a brain will say, no, this is not about Iran. This is about jamming Russia with a threat. I will next examine in depth Russia's seizure of Crimea, which is made to be the key trigger setting off this new Cold War, right? So I'll spend a lot of time on Crimea. I don't want to discuss it now. I bet this is going to be attacked. Oh, blah, 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 blah. And people don't know anything. Then I'll show you how the perception of the Russian military threat is a fabricated farce, right? Given Russia's great vulnerability and their fundamental military weakness, which has not only been proven out in long history, right, but recently they're proven. I mean, they lost to Chechnya, right? What is Chechnya? Chechnya is a tiny speck within Russia. The Russian military lost the first Chechen war to them. I mean, come on, right? And I'll go far more in detail. That's just a tidbit sampler, right? Overall, I'll prove how the United States is instigating and driving this new Cold War with Russia. I'll prove it. But proving this is going to depend upon people retaining the facts. And I just know that's not going to happen. I mean, I'm just being honest. I'm just being realistic. People won't remember things. So if you get to the end, what? You prove nothing. And then what can you do? I will show you how Russia is inherently weak and vulnerable and is being poked and prodded and threatened to react defensively, which is then portrayed as military aggression and evidence of Russia's intent on territorial conquest to recapture its glorious empire. This is just a joke. But this is really a classic get you again game, which the CIA play all the time. Though the masses never follow it, they never see it. It's played all the time, and it works. War after war, even myself. I mean, I literally had thousands of these played on me to attack my credibility, right? They play literal thousands of get you again games, and they work every time. Lastly, I will return to a discussion of hydrological engineering and controlling the flow of collective resources as a means of acquiring great wealth and power. And this is the driving motive behind the new Cold War. It's about making money. It's about steering the flow of national revenues towards power groups so that they can tap great profits. Right? Now, I don't mean to get too down on people. I do believe that there's a small handful of honest, intelligent people, right? But general human nature is to be self-serving. And to be self-serving, they want to make themselves feel good, right? And they're going to believe what they want to believe, and they're not going to know the facts, right? They're not going to retain the facts. They're not even going to try, right? They'll just reject everything without knowing anything. And even if they try, the vast majority won't retain the facts. That's just human cognition. All right. So that's an introduction. That's where we're going to go. So I put it in the context of, the long-term historical view of a new Cold War. And we had a Cold War for a long time, 40 years here. Then we were a brief interim with the War on Terror. Now we're going back to Cold War again. All right. Then I went through an outline of what I'm going to teach. I didn't present any facts yet. So if you attack, you're attacking nothing yet. I haven't presented any of the facts. All right. Okay. That's it for that lesson.